We hear the argument fairly often. But insert X socialist country failed, or socialism has never been successful. Honestly, it's a strange argument to make. Let's humor this probably real person in your life though. First of all, how would one define success? Longevity? Quality of life? Military strength? Economic performance? Political and diplomatic influence? Ceasing to exist? Measuring up, or not, to world powers at the time? By all these criteria, this or that socialist country meets those expectations, and in many cases far exceeds them. On the flip side, many capitalist countries do not. The USSR, being the premier example, lasted 7 decades, despite starting off from a position as underdeveloped as India in the early 20th century. Sanctions, civil war, German invasion, perpetual attempts at destabilization by the US and other countries, and a lot more. If we're going by quality of life, well, I made a video about that. In short, socialist countries in general provided a higher quality of life for their population at the same level of economic development, meaning whatever capabilities a country may have, all things equal, socialism would provide better housing, healthcare, education, women's rights, cultural development, and so on than if the country were to be capitalist. The idea of military strength is silly to even mention, as the greatest, unfounded, honestly, fear of the US was the USSR's military capability, which, although powerful, was used far less liberally than America's. Economic performance is also one of those things that goes without saying. The USSR started as a peasant backwater where wooden plows were being used, and within 3 decades had conquered the cosmos. They rose to such a high level that, to this day, people still unfairly compare it to the United States, a country that had 2 centuries of development ahead of the USSR and started off in far better circumstances. On top of this, the USSR had to endure a brutal civil war in which over a dozen nations, many of which were world powers, invaded its territories. On top of this, it endured all the sanctions the West had put on it from its very inception. On top of this, it endured the destruction brought about by the Germans as they destroyed every village, every city, every factory, and every farm they came across. Throughout all these trials, the Soviet Union not only recovered, but was competing with history's largest power, the United States, and even surpassing it in certain cases. Undoubtedly, had it not been illegally dissolved, it may have even surpassed the US in our current age. The second rapidly rising superpower, this time of the 21st century, is the People's Republic of China, which could have never achieved its current level of development without Mao-era policies and accomplishments. In fact, China is expected to surpass the United States in just a few years, and it'll do this with a population confident in their development and agreeing with the direction their government is taking, along with a doubling of real income by the decade and more. If we were to go by political and diplomatic influence, well, this too is fairly clear. Communism was considered to be the greatest threat to the status quo in the 20th century, and continues to be, hence the recent upswing in anti-communist media and publication. How about ceasing to exist? This one's the most common one in my personal experience. Does that mean a country has failed if it ceases to exist? Iraq, my country, is a massive mess, yet it still exists in a certain political order. Does that mean it's succeeding? These terms are so vague and, well, pointless, and only can serve to end the conversation before it has even started. How many countless capitalist countries have quote-unquote failed because of economic collapse, or political change, or military takeover? Far more than socialist countries, I can assure you. Regardless, how would you define failure? Did the Roman Empire fail? Did the numerous Portuguese republics fail? This term needs to be defined. To me, it sounds as more of an emotional attack rather than an objective characterization. If equally poor starting position capitalist countries achieved the same level of development as socialist countries, they would be considered miracles. It seems that only liberal quote-unquote democracies are spared from being considered a failure. Here's some food for thought. The United States is the richest country on Earth, and arguably in all of history, yet they have rampant poverty, unemployment, homelessness, serious issues with women's rights, amongst many other things. People prefer to die rather than go into medical debt. Stable employment and workers' rights are regularly trampled in pursuit of profits, and many Americans wouldn't even be able to handle a $500 emergency, a relatively small amount by American standards. School shootings, crumbling education, degrade infrastructure, and much more. Is this not failure? To remind you, this is with no sanctions on the US, no foreign invasion, no internal sabotage, nothing. The American government has every privilege and still manages to not guarantee a respectable and dignified existence for all its citizens. Cuba, a sanctioned third world nation targeted by the largest superpower ever known, has a thriving and efficient healthcare system that is the envy of all developing countries. They have a stronger track record than the United States when it comes to life expectancy, infant mortality, child malnutrition, literacy, and far more. How is this not success on Cuba's part? Capitalism, a system that breaks down every few years, that has inherent boom and bust cycles, is the very definition of failure. But the fallacy is to only consider the richest countries as capitalist, France, US, Britain, etc., while ignoring places like Peru or Bhutan, the Congo, Moldova, and other less palatable yet fully capitalist examples. If you had a car or electrical grid system or even a roommate as unstable as capitalism, you would have left a long time ago. Again, I reiterate my earlier point. The insert X socialist country failed statement is a sad and petty non-argument used to end a dialogue before it even began. Its use shows less of a nuanced understanding of history and more a certain level of ignorance, usually mixed with American exceptionalism or a severe malaligned scrutiny placed over socialist countries that doesn't cross over to capitalist ones. That, honestly, is the crux of the matter. The most minute negative of a socialist country is not only magnified, it's blown out of proportion or outright lied about, and the largest, most blatant positives are so heavily and unfairly, and in many cases incorrectly, scrutinized as to diminish their accomplishments and trivialize their struggles. Meanwhile, capitalist countries get a pass. The East German secret police, the Stasi, is still spoken of in ill terms to this day, hilariously by Americans who live in practically bugged houses with numerous public and private agencies spying on their every word, move, and, of course, purchase. Where their every detail is intimately known, they will condemn the East Germans while not batting an eye at their own peculiar situation. They'll condemn Soviet utilitarian housing blocks while living in incredibly small apartments themselves, where 2/3 of their paychecks go towards rent and homelessness is rampant. If you instantly recoil when hearing socialism or communism, ask yourself why. Maybe those that continuously villainize socialist examples have a vested interest in keeping the population ignorant of the facts. But the government would never lie, right? This was a quick video I decided to make as I've been encountering this argument in the wild a lot more recently. These bite-sized videos are neat, in my opinion. I might make more on single topics such as this in the future. Let me know what you think. If you enjoy what I do, then please support me on Patreon. I'd like to thank my patrons, so thank you to Sasha Novaseta, Zarin Arsin, Xiaoyan Zhang, Laurie Valdemar Miniilo, Khan, Daryl McFarlane, Ring, Andy Haywood, Ella Gerzon, Faustin, Henry Ashurst, Industrial Robot, Ray Hodginson, Tristan Druyan, Ren Kelb Lancaster, Libertarian Stalinist, Amar Abdul-Jabbar, Wes Franklin, Manda, Mia Nakano, Liam Sepanen, Connor O'Reilly, Brendan Ruffing, Jedi Davion, Knut Ringheim Linde, Alonzo the Red, Matt Smith, The Britannic, Mika Argyropoulos, Peter Coffin, Zatlarani, Comrade Pengu, and of course Charles. Thank you, Charles. I'll see you in the next one.